Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dan Baird with the Rumination Project. Welcome to my second episode of Mental Health Mondays. And that was my first episode I think I've ever done with my full intro all finished now. So that was actually really, I actually made that myself in the last week. So I really like that promo, bringing you into so you know exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Today's subject is actually anxiety, and it's something that we all seem to deal with. And it seems to be becoming even worse as the time goes on in our society. Everybody seems to have anxiety. Anxiety seems to be getting worse. We have anxiety about our children. We have anxiety about the violence, and we have a lot of anxiety about a lot of things that we used to not have anxiety about. What's going on, Becca? How you doing? We got 3 people watching, and I'm sharing out to a few more groups. Even though that 2-minute intro, it wasn't enough time for me to share out to all the groups that I normally do. And now I see why Steve and Waylon both have very long intros, so they can share out to all those groups. I think I just missed one more. And please hit that like, share button, share me out. Tonight's a really important subject. And not only am I going to be sharing information, but as always, I find a lot of good, useful videos from educated people online, and I share those as well, as we're going to be doing tonight. I found, kind of connecting the dots between a few different people on YouTube's educational videos and how anxiety exactly works in the body. Because the neuroscientist, will explain it differently than a dietitian, how anxiety exactly works. So I think it's good to see both those views. And anxiety is high over here too, Becca. I deal with anxiety. I have for most of my life since I was 12, and they've tried to put me on anxiety depressant medicines, and they never worked. You'll find something that may work for 6 months, and then it won't. And I had a video tonight by a guy. It's a TED Talk video, and he doesn't believe in medication either. He believes that to find healing anxiety, you have to do it, either with natural medicine or not using prescriptions, because a lot of Western medicine is not meant for long-term use to treat anxiety. So if you do get a prescription for anxiety, it's not meant to take for years. It's meant to kind of get you through somewhere to a point where you don't have to take it anymore. But that's not how it has been working a lot. We become dependent on these drugs, and then we get anxious on whether or not we actually took the drug that cures our anxiety, and it kind of snowballs sometimes just from taking a medication. So we're gonna start playing this video on what exactly is anxiety. I have a good I'm gonna hold on. I gotta share my screen out, but I'm gonna show you these links that I'm sharing, because a lot of these people have very good YouTube videos. So I'm going to share some of their feed and show you exactly what they are before I show you their videos. Because you may have time. I don't have time to show you all their videos, so you may find time to go through some of their catalog of videos they have to offer. And I just got to share my screen out, get in there.
About therapy.
And this is the Psych Hub, and this is they have 164,000
Therapy is just
subscribers.
talking about
basically, it says their mission is to empower everyone to create a better approach to that mental health for themselves and others. So they have 22 million views. It looks like a lot of people do view it. They have a great video on anxiety that I'm going to play here, and it looks like a lot of their other videos. They deal with a lot of stuff, all the way from to racism to meditation. They have a lot of different stuff. And it looks like they have it in different languages as well. But we're going to play their one video that I came here for. And I got to come back and find it.
There's no way I'm going to pass this exam. I don't even want to show up.
Yep.
I was so uncomfortable at that party. It was hard for me to breathe, and I got all sweaty. I had to leave.
This is basically a video
I won't
explaining
go to
actually what
sleep or
anxiety
leave the
is.
house unless
Very
I've
short
made
video,
sure the
3
stove
minutes.
is off and the doors are locked. Sometimes I do this 3 or 4 times.
I have to get to the airport 5 hours early. You just never know what might happen. These are the voices of people who have experienced anxiety. Anxiety is a common reaction to life events, like taking a final exam or speaking in front of a crowd. But when it becomes really uncomfortable and makes day-to-day life hard to live, then it's a problem, or even what we call a disorder. I know. I've lived with anxiety for a long time. My own anxiety feels like it's about everything. I worry about so many things in so many ways, and it impacts my life big time. I stress about things that are about to happen or might happen, and it means I can't really focus on where I am or who I'm with. Sometimes my heart pounds, I speak really fast, and I kind of snap at people. My family gets really frustrated with me. When it's really bad, I have a knot in my stomach all the time. I can even feel depressed, and then I just want to be alone. I feel like if I do something,
And
something will go wrong.
we'll talk about
So
that.
a lot of
The stomach
times, I just
has
rather
a huge
avoid it all.
influence on
I
anxiety.
feel so much better staying home and maybe having a drink. Turns out, anxiety is a very common mental health symptom. It can be the main sign of generalized anxiety disorder, which I have, or social anxiety disorder, which is when people have a fear of being in public or meeting new people. For those of us with social or generalized anxiety disorders, it's really difficult to live the way we want to live. Some people have anxiety about really specific things. They are afraid of heights, snakes, spiders, or something else. These are called phobias, and when people avoid these things, anxiety mostly stays away. But when people can't avoid their phobias, it is a real problem. Some people experience anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, or obsessive compulsive disorder, which can make people really
On occasion.
overcome with anxiety. In these conditions, anxiety can be so intense that people are at risk for suicide, and they use alcohol or drugs to cope, and sometimes their lives feel like they come to a halt. I'm one of the lucky ones. My doctor told me how to get the treatment that would help me, and it did. I understand now what my anxiety feels like, when it happens, and what I can do about it. I learned some great coping skills, and even just naming it keeps it in perspective. Sometimes my anxiety can still get pretty big, but it doesn't seem to last quite as long as it used to. My anxiety was treatable. For most people, this is true. You can get your life back to where you want it to be. I know. I've got mine back.
So that was a short, interesting video. Let me pause that. But the truth is that actual anxiety affects 20% of the population in the U.S. That's a lot of people, and 1 out of 5 people have anxiety at the current moment. How many people deal with it, in their whole life at one point where it becomes overwhelming? So I think it's really important that just to become very educated about how it actually occurs in the body, why it occurs, and what's going on, Kasia? Hey, Alyssa. Why it occurs in the body, and some other facts about it as well. And that was actually just a short video of what anxiety actually is. I have another one that I found that it was very intriguing when I watched through it. And a lot of anxiety, you have anxiety about having anxiety. So you may actually get anxiety because you feel the anxiety and you don't know when it's going to stop. So you get even more anxious just off of the anxiety. And this guy's description of everything, I'm not sure if he's a neuroscientist or he's a psychologist, but it's a 15-minute video and he explains it extremely well about how a lot of times that is how the issue, and he shows a lot of science behind it. So I'm going to start this video because I found it. He dragged me in, and I found it very intriguing. A lot of TED Talks are these short videos on TED Talks, especially on the TED Talks. It has 38 million subscribers.
I feel anxious about whether or not I'm going to remember what I came here.
And he presents it in a very non-boring way. I thought he was very funny about it.
Hello, my name's Tim Box, and I feel anxious. I feel anxious about whether or not I'm going to remember what I came here to say. I feel anxious about whether or not you guys are going to agree with what I came here to say. And if I'm completely honest, up until about 30 seconds ago, I felt a little bit anxious about the possibility of tripping up this rug on the way out. But I think feeling anxious about these things, while seemingly unhelpful, is perhaps understandable. After all, it's important to me that I say exactly what I came here to say, that my message gets heard, and that I achieve this without falling flat on my face. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right now, anxiety makes sense. But there was a time in my life when anxiety really didn't make sense. I used to feel the kind of anxiety that meant I would struggle to even walk into a room with this many people in it, let alone stand at the front and give a talk. Now, obviously, something has changed since then, otherwise I wouldn't be standing here now. And I think the main thing that's changed is that whilst I still experience anxiety, I no longer suffer with it. But I didn't achieve this shift by trying to get rid of it. Now, don't get me wrong, back in the day, that's exactly what I was trying to do. I would do all I could to avoid any anxiety-inducing situation. I would arrange my daily movements, specifically avoiding social situations. If I felt anxiety starting to flare up, I'd run away. I'd do all I could to retreat to safety and then employ various distraction techniques to take my mind away from the horribly uncomfortable feeling that something bad was about to happen.
It's wild how much fear and anxiety just relate to each other. When you have anxiety hits this strange fear over mediocre stuff, just comes out of nowhere, and you become kind of stuck where you can't proceed and do whatever, like he's saying, go out in public and stuff like that. So fear and anxiety are very, very, they're nearly the same thing.
But it turns out that was my big mistake. You see, you don't get rid of anxiety by trying to get rid of it. Truth is, you don't get rid of anxiety at all. Now, by some twist of fate, or perhaps as a direct result of what I went through back then, I now work with anxiety sufferers to help them understand and ultimately overcome those feelings. I've spent a large part of the last 10 years talking to anxiety sufferers about their anxiety. And whilst all those I spoke to had their own individual story, their own personal journey with anxiety, every single one of them at some point expressed exactly the same desire that I used to have. The desire to get rid of anxiety completely. Can you imagine if we all achieved that? A world without anxiety. What would that even look like? Well, for example, this room would probably look empty. Anxiety is the feeling that tells us when something is worth demanding our attention. So in some small way, it was anxiety that reminded you had somewhere to be today. Without it, none of us would have turned up, and those that accidentally did would be watching an empty stage. None of us would have businesses, careers, because we wouldn't have regarded study and gaining qualifications as worth bothering with. And none of us would have boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, or wives either here or at home, because we just wouldn't have seen the value of washing and dressing up to make a good impression on that all-important first date.
He's right. Anxiety
that we probably forgot to turn up.
Make so many of our decisions.
So it seems anxiety is important.
What's up, Waylon?
But of course, there are those that don't feel anxiety. There are two very distinct groups. The first group, dead people. Dead people don't feel anxious. And I think that's okay. They're dead. They've got enough to not worry about. The second group would be those we might refer to as psychopaths. Those people that, for whatever reason, lack the ability to have any concern for the consequences of theirs or anyone else's actions.
Psychopaths actually don't have any anxiety at all. I
don't know how you were brought up, but when I was a kid, I was given the distinct impression that being part of either of these two groups would be undesirable. So if being free of anxiety would be such a bad idea, why do we regard feeling anxious so negatively? Now, I think the very obvious answer to that question is that it feels horrible. When we suffer high levels of anxiety over a long period of time, it can very quickly start to dominate our life, even go on to define our existence. Of course, we're going to try and get rid of it. But what if we can't? What if all of our attempts to control our anxiety response ultimately fail, then where do we go? I think most people go along to their local doctor. And I should state at this point, I'm a big fan of doctors. They've saved my life on more than one occasion, and I feel a tremendous amount of sympathy for them when it comes to treating anxiety issues, because it's really not what they signed up for, and it's certainly not what they're trained for.
Exactly
when it comes to anxiety, doctors are restricted in 3 important ways. Firstly, time. You get somewhere between 8 and 11 minutes for an appointment with your local GP, which is nowhere near enough time to effectively diagnose and treat an anxiety issue. Secondly, knowledge. Doctors are taught that anxiety is a mental health condition, and yet they're not mental health specialists. If a doctor wishes to become one of those, they have to train for a further 5 or 6 more years to become a psychiatrist. And thirdly, resources. Doctors are given precious little support when it comes to actually treating anxiety. They can put you on a 12 to 16-week waiting list for some form of counselling, but by the time we got to the doctor, we're probably in such desperate need of assistance that being told we now have to wait 3 or 4 months to talk to somebody is not helpful. That leaves the only other option, medication. I'm not a fan of medicating anxiety. Now, whilst I'm well aware that taking drugs can change the way we feel, back in the 90s, I witnessed many of my friends on a Saturday night discovering that very simple truth. But with medication comes all sorts of unpredictable and unpleasant side effects. And in the unlikely event we do find the drug that agrees with you, that calms your anxiety response without any side effects, then of course it's all too easy to now regard ourselves as dependent on that drug. And then the possibility of developing a dependency on our anti-anxiety medication just becomes something else to feel anxious about. The truth is, a medical solution to a non-medical problem will not solve that problem. It will at best just patch over it for a short while. Now, the irony here is that most of the people I've spoken to, they already know all of this. They know the doctor is not a great option for our anxiety, which then begs the very obvious question, so why do we go there? I believe we go there because these days we are told anxiety is an illness. And this is perhaps the one certain result of going to the doctor for your anxiety. You will come away from there labelled with an anxiety issue, maybe even diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And now you have a brand new thing to feel anxious about. During the thousands of conversations I've had with anxiety sufferers, there was a common thread. When asked what they felt most anxious about, the answer was generally how anxious they felt and if it would ever stop. This concern is almost entirely created and fueled by the idea that anxiety is an illness. Anxiety is not an illness. Anxiety is an emotion. Every emotion is important. Every emotion has a purpose. Every emotion is a natural and vital part of our human experience.
100%.
In that respect, anxiety is no more sinister than any other feeling we might have. If we didn't feel anxiety, we'd be one emotion short of the full set. That really would be a disorder. I want to share with you now an analogy that might go some way towards helping us understand our emotional responses. I want you to think of your mind like a ship. Every ship has a captain and a crew. In this analogy, the captain is your logical, rational, conscious part of your thinking. It's the part that knows where you want to go, why you want to go there, and it has a fair idea of how you think you're going to get there. Unfortunately, the part of our mind that has its hands on all the things that steer and sail our ship, that's the crew. That's your subconscious. Your subconscious is in charge of all of your automatic responses. So your patterns of thought and behavior, your belief systems, and perhaps most importantly, your emotions. Your crew sail your ship by triggering the appropriate emotional responses. So, for example, if we regard something as dangerous, our crew might trigger the feeling of fear. We'll become uncomfortable, and this feeling will encourage us to move away from the danger to return to comfort. If we believe we've been wronged, a member of our crew might trigger anger. We'll energize, and our focus will be drawn towards taking whatever action is necessary to right the wrong. So what about anxiety? Why do our crew trigger that particular emotion? Now, no doubt every single one of us will have our own idea about what anxiety means to us. But put simply, anxiety is the emotion that tells us when something is too important to simply lose focus of. It's the voice of concern about an upcoming event or situation that refuses to be ignored. It's the crew saying to the captain, you need to pay attention to this.
It's a very good description.
Now, here's the important part. Your crew are operating on one very simple principle. They're trying to find the best strategy for the most happiness. Yes, safety is important. After all, safety is a huge component part of happiness. We can't feel happy if we don't feel safe. But ultimately, at all times, your crew are trying to steer you in the direction of happiness. As the American author John Shedd once wrote, a ship in harbour is safe, but that is not what ships are built for. So even when your crew are making you feel awful, telling you things about yourself you really don't want to hear, those seemingly self-destructive thoughts, I'm not good enough, I'll never succeed, I'm unlovable, even these harsh words are simply designed to steer you away from any situation that might lead to an unhappy experience. They're not trying to sink the ship, they're just trying to sail it away from the stormy seas that we fear we might not be able to cope with.
The PTSD.
But every decision your crew makes is based upon the things you've learned throughout your life. And because many of these things were learned when you were very young, some of them no longer apply. Some of them were just wrong in the first place. What this means is that as far as anxiety is concerned, your crew will very often make mistakes. But just because they get things wrong doesn't make them the enemy. And yet, this is a sentiment I hear all the time. Anxiety is the enemy. People want to throw those crew members overboard. And I can understand that. After all, if we regard a part of our mind as now actively trying to destroy us, then of course it would be easy to view it as the enemy. If we then believe our mind has actually turned against us, it'd be easy to conclude our mind is broken. It'd be easy to believe that person that told us the way you feel means you are ill. I started this talk by telling you I used to suffer debilitating levels of social anxiety. So how did I get control of that? What did I actually do to reduce it? There are three main things I did that I think helped me change. First thing I did, I refused to believe I was ill. Of all the things I felt anxious about, I decided not to feel anxious about feeling anxious.
You got a good point.
I recognized that every time I felt anxiety, it wasn't random. It was always triggered by a situation or a thought process. Once I understood this, I could do the second thing. That's to listen to my crew. I'd spent too long pushing them away, trying to ignore what they were telling me. When you ignore someone with an important message, they might just start to speak louder to get heard. If you continue to ignore them, they might start to shout. The only way I was going to stop anxiety from shouting at me was to listen to it, to hear what it was saying to me. I sought to understand what my crew were trying to achieve with these feelings and to turn my enemies into my friends. Now, the funny thing is, when you start listening to what your mind's trying to tell you, it can stop shouting. When the crew stops shouting, the captain can be heard. That's the point where your more logical thinking gets to have some input. You get to decide, is this feeling appropriate or inappropriate? Is it helpful or unhelpful? Once you have the ear of your crew and you know what you would want from them, the third thing, maybe the most important thing, is to always, always be kind to them. If you're anything like me, you spent a large part of your life beating yourself up over the things you did wrong, or the things you didn't quite do right, or just about the way you feel. For all the criticism and negativity you've received from others throughout your life, the person who's given you the most is probably you. This has the cumulative effect of destroying morale aboard your ship. A demoralized crew equals low self-esteem. And low self-esteem means now the slightest challenge will create anxiety. But the good news is you can repair the damage that's been done very easily, simply by deciding from now on to always talk to your crew, to yourself, with kindness and positivity. People do their best work when they feel empowered to achieve. Your crew are no different. Put simply, if you beat yourself up, you just end up beaten. If you build yourself up, who knows how far we can reach? This is why I think it's okay, maybe even important, to feel anxiety every single day of our lives. It means the crew are still sailing the ship and still trying to get it in the right direction. It's the part of you that makes you reread the important email before you send it. It's the part that makes sure you check your keys are in your pocket before you slam the front door on your way out in the morning. And it's the part that makes your heart skip a little bit when you think about giving that important presentation at work or in a theatre. Truth is, I still feel anxious all the time.
Right?
For example, every Friday morning, I wake feeling anxious because Friday is dustbin day. My crew wake me with the thought, I need to go and take the bins out. Now, it's not debilitating anxiety. It's barely a whisper. It's just loud enough to get heard, and then when I've taken the bins out, it's gone. And this might seem like a really trivial example, but this is exactly the sort of thing that will trouble us if we believe the way we feel is not normal. I wonder if back in the day when I'd suffered high levels of anxiety, if I'd been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, would I now dread Friday mornings? Would I feel anxious about the prospect of my anxiety flaring up again? Would I curse myself for still not being free of anxiety?
Yeah.
There tend to be two popular positions on high anxiety. The first states it's a mental illness. It's the way you're wired. There's little we can do about it. The second states it's not real. It's all in your head. You just need to get over it. Neither of these positions are helpful, and both are wrong. The last 10 years have taught me the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Of course it's real. We don't ask to feel this way, and yet we do. Yet even though we feel this way now, doesn't mean we can't change it.
Yeah.
The first step towards changing it is to accept it. Once we accept anxiety as a natural part of our human experience and treat it not as our enemy, but as a trusted friend, you'll be surprised how quickly the crew just get back to sailing the ship, and we start to feel a lot less anxious about anxiety. So, how do you feel today? Do you feel anxious about something? Good. That means you're alive. It means there's a part of you trying to tell you something it regards as important. Have a listen. It's here to help. My name is Tim Box, and now, 18 minutes later, I feel a lot less anxious. Thank you very much.
I think that's a really good presentation on actual anxiety, and his name is Tim Box. I don't know what he actually does. They don't really give a lot of information, but you can go TEDx Talks on YouTube. They have so many videos. So many stuff like that. But most of them they're educational purposes, so you can play them on your podcast usually without any issues. I do use them a lot. I have for years without any copyrights. But they have a lot of different videos. He had a very interesting take on it, how anxiety is a normal, reaction, just like crying or laughing. Having anxiety protects us. It keeps us out of trouble. I actually get sometimes I get anxious when you're traveling and the road gets really, really busy, and that anxiety can keep you safe in a situation where you're driving. It makes you more focused. It keeps you more, gives you more attention to the road when you have that extra anxiety. So there are times where it's important for your survival to experience that anxiety. But when it becomes overwhelming and you experience it every day, like he said, that's when it becomes a really big issue. Yeah. Well, at least I don't think, but a lot of kids do. You do give parents anxiety. I don't think you're alone there. But especially when you have a lot of kids involved, and so unfortunately kids, I think, will always give you anxiety no matter how much time goes by. And I get to hang out with my nephews this weekend, so I'm going to be around a bunch of kids. They're all 5 to 7, so I like hanging out with them. They're all pretty interesting and intriguing. But I don't get to take them home with me, so that's why I don't get anxiety. My brother does joke that he's going to bring the kids home with me, and I don't know how I would handle 2 twins living in this house. I would probably freak out. But that guy's take, I like the fact that he likes that TED Talk about, medication and actually, finding ways of listening to the anxiety and actually what the anxiety is trying to tell you, and then not getting the anxiety because you have anxiety, which seems to happen a lot. What's going on, Waylon? Yeah, cannabis definitely works good for anxiety. There are strains that cause anxiety, unfortunately, too, when you smoke too much. That's why we need a lot more research on cannabis. We need a lot more research to figure out exactly which strains still work the best so we can avoid having anxiety when we consume something that should, can help with anxiety. But there are a couple other videos I'm going to play. The other issue I really wanted to talk about a lot is that the fact that a lot of our anxiety is literally caused by our stomach. And this girl's, I have the same issue. I've had the same issue my whole life because I've taken prescription medicine. I've actually developed gut issues where my biomass, my biobacteria does not regulate right. So I get anxiety based on stuff I eat. Certain foods can give me more anxiety. I found out recently, especially gluten products. So she's going to talk about a lot of issues that have to do with how our stomachs really influence, our moods. And I can't explain it very well because I didn't go to school for that. So this lady, I'll pop her up here, bring this back up. It's called Therapy in a Nutshell.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to my passion project.
Pause that. And she has 1.39 million subscribers on YouTube. She has a lot of different podcasts or videos on trauma triggers, anxiety. Looks like she deals a lot with anxiety, child anxiety. So she has a lot of interesting content. So if you ever want to go check her out, she's definitely educated, and I'll show you here why she is educated. Her video is very, very short, but she provides a lot of information.
Every molecule in your brain once was on your fork.
Right.
Your gut directly impacts your mental health. From nutrient absorption that impacts the physical building blocks of the brain, to inflammation, which can lead to cytokines to damage your brain, to your microbiome, which impacts your physical and mental health. Your gut health is actually a huge contributing factor to your mental health. So in this video, you'll learn 4.5 ways to improve your gut health, which can improve your mental health. So real quick, let's talk about the gut-brain microbiome axis.
Again, her channel is called Therapy in a Nutshell if you want to go check her out.
Okay, the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It runs from the brain all over the body, from the eyes to the throat, down to the chest and stomach, down into the pelvis. And it sends messages in both directions, from the brain to the gut and from the gut to the brain. And those messages are often about whether to be stressed or to be relaxed. When the brain is healthy and happy, and when you're surrounded by friends and feeling relaxed, the brain sends messages to the gut to have healthy hunger and fullness cues, to digest and absorb nutrients, and to process food in a healthy way. This is the rest and digest state of the autonomic nervous system. When you're stressed, on the other hand, the fight or flight response essentially puts eating and processing food and pooping on the back burner. So, for example, that huge assignment at work feels like a threat. It triggers the survival mode, and the brain cues the digestive system to decrease hunger. Or, on the other hand, to hurriedly consume some carbs for quick defensive action. So your brain directly...
And you can actually prove that. I know I have the same issue. If you go on vacation your digestive system usually changes. And I see it change if I'm in a different place. Your whole digestive system is not as regular as it was before. And that's because you may be, if you're on vacation, you're not as stressful as you're at home. So your body is way more relaxed, including your digestive system. So anxiety influences your digestive system so much, and it can cause so many issues in your body later in life into your 40s and 50s that can eventually kill you. And that's why what she's saying is very important about the way our microbiome, affects our brain.
Impacts your gut. But information goes both directions. If your gut gets really upset, maybe you're eating something you're intolerant to, or you have an allergy to a food. This also sends a message to your brain to kick on that survival response, to power up the inflammation response, and to defend itself. So in that way, the brain and the gut interact in a mutual feedback loop. When you've just finished an amazingly delicious meal with close friends, that satisfying feeling in your gut can trigger waves of pleasure and relaxation and send a message to your brain to calm down. The gut also literally processes emotions. So every emotion has a brain component and a gut component. And you'll notice this in our common language. Notice how many emotions are described as a gut feeling, a kick in the gut, gut wrenching, sick to my stomach, butterflies in the stomach, etc., right? So your gut and your brain, again, are closely connected. During sleep and when we dream, the gut reacts to emotions and processes them. The gut literally works through the feelings of the day. So when the brain is healthy and works through emotions, the gut can process emotions too, and vice versa. We can help our gut be healthier by decreasing stress and increasing positive experiences. And we can help our brain be healthier by improving our gut health. And one of the best ways to do that is to foster a healthy microbiome. So your gut microbiome consists of flora, like fungi, and fauna, bacteria, that help you digest and absorb food and stay healthy and happy. Diet, age, medications, including antibiotics and SSRIs, stress, sleep, and exercise, these can all negatively or positively impact gut bacteria.
Your gut bacteria.
People with anxiety and depression have a different gut microbiome than people who are healthy. They have a higher amount of bad bacteria that can send inflammation into the body and the brain. Improving your microbiome diversity directly impacts your mood. So how can we do that? Here are 4.5.
You know why these antibiotics and these things influence our gut more, than help? Because they made these medications before they even knew what our gut was. So these medications are still on the market too. And the fact is, when they made these medications on the market, we did not know how complex our digestive system actually is. And they kept these medications, they're still on the market now, yet they still are proven that they destroy your gut bacteria and in fact exacerbate the actual anxiety, making it worse down the road, or depression as well, because you destroyed your gut microbiome, which actually regulates your mood more than the medication does. So I mean, what are we really doing with Western medicine besides just destroying the body even more?
Ways to improve your microbiome. The first one is prebiotics. Most people have heard of probiotics, but prebiotics are actually very influential. Prebiotics are essentially dietary fiber, the fibrous bits of food that we can't digest. This is what our gut bacteria lives on. So, for example, some of the good bacteria eat fiber from carrots, and others eat fiber from beets. To foster a healthy and varied gut microbiome, we need to be feeding our good bacteria a wide variety of plants. And one study found that prebiotics decrease cortisol, a stress hormone. So real quick, let's hear from Dr. Nikki Dineza.
There's a main reason right there where anxiety's up. We are coming away from, an agriculture diet where we're fast food, processed food, gluten, like Joe Kelly in the comments said, and he has a son where gluten will highly influence his mood. But the fact that that's all that we can offer, that we have so many gluten products on the market that end up influencing your gut bacteria, which end up influencing your mood, and then now we have millions of people literally walking around with altered gut bacteria, and they're feeling lousy because of it. And we don't talk enough about how this is influences our whole society. Because imagine if we all had healthy gut microbes, we would all be a lot healthier. We would all be a lot happier. We would all have a lot better interactions with each other.
How we can improve our prebiotic intake.
There was a really neat
So
paper a few years ago where they actually were able to give us more of a definitive number. It's
Intake.
there was a
I meant to say, Joe, if anything, you should try prebiotics. Like she's saying, she's going to say here that how prebiotics can actually influence a lot into a mood. Maybe you can like put it into his food that he likes to eat and hide it in the powder form, because they do make a lot of prebiotics and probiotics in powder form, and it's easy to hide in food without having any taste. But she's going to explain that right now.
really neat paper a few years ago where they actually were able to give us more of a definitive number. It seems like the number is 30 per week. If you could get 30 different fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains in your diet, different fiber sources, if you could hit that mark of 30 each week consistently, that is very well correlated with better microbial health, better diversity, and better richness in the gut microbiome, and better overall health outcomes.
Okay, number 2 is probiotics. This is eating foods that already include good bacteria. So this means eating fermented foods like yogurt, kimchi, kefir, and kombucha. And probiotics work best on an empty stomach. There's also a lot of probiotic supplements and a ton of companies offering to test your poop and sell.
Remember that useful knowledge. She said prebiotics work best on an empty stomach. So if you do have probiotics, they do work best on an empty stomach. I don't know a lot of the directions tell you to eat food or not, or if you're out, but she's a dietitian, so I assume that she's probably the one you should listen to.
Sell you a customized probiotic supplement. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough data to know which types of probiotics help which types of people yet. So I would just be a little bit wary of claims otherwise, especially claims that involve selling you something for the rest of your life. That being said, some probiotic supplements may be helpful at improving depression and anxiety symptoms. Okay, number 3, decrease inflammation. Inflammation is a good thing in small doses. It's how your body fights off germs and heals wounds. But emerging research is showing that chronic, sustained inflammation can influence inflammation in the brain. So how do you decrease inflammation in your gut? You can start by decreasing sugar, processed food, and saturated fats. And then you could work with a qualified specialist.
Look at that list right there. And what is America known for? Like, you can literally see why we have an anxiety problem with this list. When your gut becomes inflamed, you get anxiety. This is exactly why when you eat sugar, why when you eat processed food, you feel like shit. Why why this all occurs. And it all occurs in our gut microbiome. This is where it all happens. This is where all the anxiety is created, and then it goes into our brain. This is a huge issue, and still has to do with our diet so heavily, of why we have anxiety issues and why we have all these other depressive issues and this outbreak of mental health. And it's because of this processed foods. And I understand why our society has gone towards more processed foods, because our population has skyrocketed. We can't produce, maybe we can, maybe, I don't know, but we've never tried it, to produce more vegetables and more natural products besides these ones that are, grown with all these things added that are not very healthy for us. So I'll keep finishing this video because I think she's very intriguing.
To explore allergies and intolerances. Another thing to consider is the Mediterranean diet. It's one of the most researched approaches to improving mental health, and a strict adherence to the Mediterranean diet is associated with a 35% decreased risk of depression. Okay, number 4, decrease your stress. The brain and the gut interact in a cycle. When you do the work to decrease your stress levels, you can decrease inflammation, you can improve your digestion, and you can start a positive upward spiral, both mentally and physically. If you don't know where to start, I've got a free course, Grounding Skills for Stress, Anxiety, and PTSD. The link is in the description. Okay, here's the last one. I'm not even going to count this one as an option, but it kind of is. Fecal transplants have been effective at restoring gut health in some people.
Sounds disgusting.
And they've also been shown to be effective at treating depression in a few very limited
I never
studies.
knew this.
Now, as I said before, emerging research is showing that people with depression have a different gut biome than healthy people. Some research is beginning to show that if you take poop from someone who is healthy and you implant it into the gut of someone who isn't, that can help them. Unfortunately, we don't have enough data to know which strains of bacteria are the most important or helpful. Okay, so there you have it. 4.5 ways to improve your gut health that may improve your mental health. Have you tried any of them, or are you thinking about it? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and take care.
She has so much information in that 8 minutes. That's crazy how much information she presents. So all her other stuff on YouTube is probably very intriguing, but we don't have all night to go over her thousands of videos she does have. She's called Therapy in a Nutshell. She looks like she does a lot with anxiety, PTSD, anxiety based on your children's anxiety is what I'm trying to say. But anxiety is very complex. I think that video showed that a lot of it is caused in our gut, and a lot of it's caused by our food we eat. It's caused in my body. 95% of my anxiety is caused by my gut microbe, and I feel it in the morning. You may feel it in the morning. Your gut bacteria in the morning is very sensitive because your organs have kind of gone offline, and when they first reactivate, they can send a signal to the brain from the stomach, and that you can get anxiety. I used to wake up and have extreme anxiety for 15 seconds. And I've kind of gotten rid of that now because I do take probiotics. This is actually the strain that I take. This stuff is kind of expensive. You can get the 60 pack for $33 on Amazon, but I 100% see a difference in my mood when I take it. I 100% see a difference in my morning anxiety. I think it's better than prescription medicines I've actually have been prescribed. And it's pretty sad that I bought something on Amazon that works better than half of the stuff that a doctor's given me that costs 10 times more than that. It never worked. When all my doctor could have said was like, hey, go buy some probiotics. And this one has prebiotics in it too. And my hands aren't dirty, by the way. I actually have been working with some colored grout, so it dyes your hands a little bit. So I hopefully don't have to explain why my hands look like they're dirty. But yeah, probiotics, like she was saying, prebiotics, make sure there's prebiotics in it, because the prebiotics are the ones that actually like help regulate that gut microbe a lot. We need that. And Joe, maybe like I said, you can buy the powder. This stuff is capsules and there's powder in it. And maybe you could take powder of prebiotic or probiotic and actually put it into his food. It may actually, I don't have a lot of research. I'm not a doctor, but with mood disorders, it may help improve it if he has, that healthy gut microbe. I mean, it would only make sense. But I also had another one, how to calm your anxiety. And this is from a neuroscientist. I found it very intriguing. Her video, I found it last night. And let me start it here. And we're going to start talking about ways to actually get rid of anxiety if you do have it. And this is another TED Talk series. They usually put these on here and then they don't have a lot of big explanation of who the person is. I don't see a lot about who this woman is. Neuroscientist Wendy Suzeki, there she is, shares 2 evidence-based activities, breathing and movement that can soothe your nervous system and fuel creativity and connection to your body. So we'll start playing that.
From your boss, and you start to feel sweaty palms and that empty, freaked out sensation in your stomach. Welcome back, anxiety. Most of us think of anxiety as a bad thing, something to be avoided at all costs. But what if it weren't? What if you could take all of that energy racing around your brain and your body and transform it into something helpful? global anxiety levels, both the clinical kind and what I call the everyday kind, have increased tremendously in recent years. And many of us are noticing this at work. We might think of anxiety as something that we'd rather just leave on the side of the road if we could. But anxiety is an important tool that arose during our evolution that we use to avoid danger. It's essential for our survival. So how come we don't even feel vaguely protected?
People seem to forget that we are, at one point we were hunters and gatherers, and our anxiety was an important part of that hunting. And now in this society, it's not needed as much to hunt. Our food is, you go to the grocery store, it's provided. So that hunting part of what we used to have in our evolution is not needed as much because it used to help us hunt a lot better, that keen anxiety sense.
By it. It's because the volume of our individual and collective anxiety levels has been turned way up too high, and too much of even a potentially good thing like anxiety is bad. So I would like to share 2 powerful science-based tools for turning down the volume on our anxiety and helping us get anxiety back to its helpful, protective state. And both of these tools begin by connecting with our bodies. Tool number 1 is breath work. It's just simple, deep breathing.
Literally, listen to this lady.
Inhale and exhale. This can be one of the most immediate ways to calm anxiety because deep breath directly activates the natural de-stressing part of our nervous systems called the parasympathetic nervous system. I recommend a boxed breathing approach, which is inhale deeply on 4 counts, hold at the top for 4 counts, exhale deeply on 4 counts, and hold at the bottom for 4 counts. You can even do this in the middle of any anxiety-provoking conversation, and no one will even know. Lots of people, from ancient monks to modern meditators, have figured this tool out and use it all the time. Tool number 2, moving your body. This one also has immediate positive effects on your mood state, but for a different reason. Every time you move your body, you're releasing a whole bunch of beneficial neurochemicals in your brain. These neurochemicals include dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline, and endorphins, mood and reward boosting neurochemicals that work to both increase positive mood states and decrease negative ones. I like to say that every single time you move your body, it's like giving yourself a wonderful bubble bath of neurochemicals for your brain. So when your boss's email comes in and your heart starts to race, what exactly can you do? If you're in an office, try taking a short walk around the block or even to the supply closet for some sticky notes. If you're working from home, put on 2 of your favorite songs and dance around the living room like no one is watching. Studies have shown that all it takes is 10 minutes of walking to get those mood-boosting effects. But be creative with your movement session, whether that's a quick session of power vacuuming a la Mrs. Doubtfire when you're stressed about a deadline, or doing a set of jumping jacks or getting off the elevator 1 floor early to do a power walk up that last flight of stairs before an important meeting. All of these possibilities will all help your anxiety levels come down. In fact, I tested this effect on my own NYU students. First, I had them take an anxiety assessment before leading them in a movement session that included movements from kickbox and dance and yoga and martial arts together with positive spoken affirmations. Then I had them retake that same anxiety assessment again. What happened? After our movement session, their anxiety scores had decreased to normal levels. Now that's powerful, real-world example that you can use in your life today. So make sure to incorporate these bursts of activity in your day and try one out next time you're feeling stress. It can really make your anxiety feel less all-consuming. Once you connect with your body and turn the volume down on your anxiety, two important things will happen. First, when that email comes in, you'll be in a better position to evaluate what about it makes you anxious. Is it that you've taken on too much, or that you feel insecure about a particular skill set? In other words, you'll be able to use this emotion, anxiety, for exactly what it was evolved to do. Warn you about potential dangers so you can become aware of them and find ways to effectively and creatively address them in your everyday life. Second, once you find the warning signals in your anxiety, you'll be able to communicate with others. You might seek out advice from a trusted colleague when that difficult issue arises. Or you might even have a conversation with your boss about how to prioritize projects. Because you're no longer in fight or flight mode,
Right. You communicate
asking for
so
that
much better when
support
you're not in fight or
won't feel nearly as threatening. And one of the best gifts of approaching your anxiety in this way is that you will be able to notice those telltale signs of anxiety in everyone else around you,
Yep.
especially those forms of anxiety you're most familiar with. And what will that do? That will allow you to give that person a smile or a kind word to help them through that moment. In other words, your own form of anxiety can boost your personal superpower of empathy.
You can't hide
And I
anxiety.
can't think of anything we need in this world today more than higher levels of empathy for one another. Your take home in all of this? If you breathe, move, and take note of what your anxiety is signaling, you'll feel more fulfilled, more creative, more connected, and less stressed overall. And that's my wish for every one of us.
That's a great video.
You know, when you get that
Right.
ambiguous email from your boss and you start,
It's a great explanation of, how to relieve anxiety through breathing. The breathing techniques work because I've already tried it twice since I've watched that video the other night, and it does immediately relieve your anxiety, especially if you're having an anxiety attack or you have a moment where I have bipolar, so I have times where I have manic issues where you have this high, the anxiety just all of a sudden surges and then you're suffocated. And I found at that time when you actually do these breathing exercises, you can literally cut the time that you have these episodes to a fraction of what they were when you immediately start to do them. Because like she says, we have this whole system inside of our body. And when you breathe, it kind of brings that system forward to help you ease that anxiety down. Because anxiety is all caused inside of our gut. As the other video says, the majority of it's caused in our gut, moves up through our gut into our brain through the signals. And that can be, that's usually how we have panic attacks and other issues. I get panic attacks based on what I eat. So when I eat a lot of gluten, a lot of sugar, and then I do something that will give me anxiety, the attacks can come a little more severe than normal anxiety. So that's when I know that I need that. And recently I've been backing off of gluten completely. The last 3 days, I've probably consumed only 5% of the gluten I was before. And I've seen a huge difference in my mood. It's still kind of weird. I still have a lot of brain fog because I have an issue with food intolerance that causes brain fog if I eat gluten, and then kind of enhances the symptoms of bipolar. So that's our food. It really, really influences our mood. So you have to pay attention to how, like a food you eat, how, 6 hours later, how do you feel? How do you feel mentally? How did that make you feel? And if you pay attention to that, you can target the foods that really make your mind feel great, and as well as other things. And I know that a lot of other people have a lot of eating issues too, and they have anxiety because of these eating issues, these gut issues. And it sucks. It's so hard. It's hard to fix. You can't fix, a gut issue overnight. It takes years to fix with with probiotics. So you can take prebiotics and probiotics, but I've talked to an expert. He's a pro athlete. He told me it took him almost 2 years to correct his gut to a place where he felt healthy. So it can take a long time, and he had to take probiotics. He was taking all kinds of eating certain foods, lots of fruits, lots of green things, and kombucha. Can't ever say that word. The tea that's really expensive, the yogurts and stuff like that. And unfortunately, a lot of these healthy products are expensive to eat. So you won't see them in your middle to low income class people's fridges, unfortunately, because they are expensive. And they're hard to afford if you have, you're on a budget. But there was another interesting video. This guy has it's 2 hours long, but he talked, I think that was another reading episode. And he had a very interesting take on a portion of this podcast talking about the gut microbe. But he talked about the gut microbe, and he actually went a little more in depth in it. And here, let me pop this up so I'm not the only one looking at it. But this is how to enhance your gut microbiome. Actually, that's not the whole podcast. Yeah, that actually is what it's called.
Humans that show that if the gut microbiome is deficient in some way to these particular
again. But he says that we have these cells, these neuropod cells that are subconscious that are basically release all these other chemicals and dopamine, serotonin based on what we eat. And when you eat healthy food, these neuropod cells are happy and healthy. When they eat bad cells, they kind of get anxiety, and that's what causes the anxiety. But he's talking more on a very specific level. And I think this is where he talks about it.
And can communicate what the chemistry and what digestion. So that should give you a fairly complete picture of your gut microbiome. Now I'd like to talk about and gut. And that should not surprise you, digestion. So that should give you a fairly complete picture of your gut microbiome. Now I'd like to talk about how your microbiome and your brain communicate, or more accurately, how your microbiome and the rest of your nervous system communicate. Neurons, which simply means nerve cells, are the cells that do most of the heavy lifting in your nervous system. There are, of course, other cell types that are important. Glial cells, for instance, very, very important cell types. You have endothelial cells, which are responsible for blood flow, pericytes, and other types of cells. But the neurons are really doing most of the heavy lifting for most of the things we think about in terms of nervous system function. You have neurons in your gut, and that should not surprise you. Neurons reside in your brain, your spinal cord, your eyes, in fact, all over your body. And you've got them in your heart, and you've got them in your lungs, and you've got them in your spleen, and they connect to all the different organs and tissues of your body. So that's not surprising that you have neurons in your gut. What is surprising, however, is the presence of particular types of neurons that reside near or in the mucosal lining just next to that lumen of the gut, and that are paying attention, and I'll explain what I mean by paying attention, to the components of the gut, both the nutrients and the microbiota, and thereby can send signals up to the brain by way of a long wire that we call an axon, and can communicate what the chemistry what the nutritional quality and what the other aspects of the environment are at the gut at a given location up to the brain in ways that can influence the brain to, for instance, seek out more of a particular food. Let me give you a sort of action-based picture.
Talking about your subconscious.
Let's say, like most people, you enjoy sweet foods. I don't particularly enjoy sweet foods, but there are a few that I like. I'm a sucker for a really good dark chocolate, or really good ice cream, or I got this thing for donuts that seems to just not quit, although I don't tend to indulge it very often. I do like them. If I eat that particular food, obviously digestion starts in the mouth. There are enzymes there. It gets chewed up. The food goes down into the gut. These neurons are activated, meaning that causes the neurons to be electrically active when particular components, certain nutrients in those foods are present. And for the cell types, or I should say the neuron types that matter here, the nutrients that really trigger their activation are sugar, fatty acids, and amino acids. Now, these particular neurons have the name enteroendocrine cells, but more recently, they've been defined as neuropod cells. Neuropod cells were discovered by Diego Bojorquez's lab at Duke University. This is a phenomenal set of discoveries made mostly in the last 10 years. These neuropod cells, as I mentioned, are activated by sugar, fatty acids, or amino acids, but have a particularly strong activation to sugars. They do seem to be part of the sweet sensing system. And even though I'm focusing on this particular example, they represent a really nice example of how a particular set of nerve cells in our gut is collecting information about what is there at a particular location in the gut and sending that information up to our brain. Now, they do that by way of a nerve pathway called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is part of the peripheral nervous system, and the vagus nerve is a little bit complex to describe if you're just listening to this. If you're watching this, I'll try and use my hands as a diagram, but really the best thing to do if you really want to learn neuroanatomy is to just imagine it in your mind as best you can. And if you can track down a picture of it, terrific. But here's how it works. Neurons have a cell body that we call a soma. That's where all the DNA are contained. That's where a lot of the operating machinery of the cells are contained, and a lot of the instructions for that cell of what to be and how to operate are contained. The cell bodies of these neurons, or the relevant neurons, are actually up near the neck. So you can think of them as kind of a clump of grapes, because cell bodies tend to be round or ovalish. And then they send a process that we call an axon in one direction out to the gut, and they'll send another process up into the brain. And that little cluster near the neck that's relevant here is called the nodose ganglion, N-O-D-O-S-E. The nodose ganglion is this little cluster of neurons on either side of the neck. It has a process that goes out to the gut and a process that goes up into the brain.
Interesting. I did not
And
know
again,
that.
these are just one component of the so-called vagus nerve. The vagus nerve has many, many branches, not just to the gut. There are also branches to the liver, branches to the lungs, branches to the heart, branches to the larynx, and even to the spleen and other areas of the body that are important. But right now, we're just concentrating on the neurons that are in the gut that signal up to the brain. And what the Bojorquez lab has shown is that these neuropod cells are part of this network. They're sensing several different nutrients, but in particular, when they sense sugar, they send signals in the form of electrical firing up to the brain in ways that trigger activation of other brain stations that cause you to seek out more of that particular food.
I've had that experience happen, but I never.
This
had
brings us to some classic experiments that, at least to me, are incredible. And these are highly reproducible findings, showing, for instance, that even if you bypass taste by infusing sweet liquid or putting sweet foods into the gut, and people can never taste them with their mouth, people will seek out more of that particular food. And if you give them the option to have a sweet food infused into their gut, or a bitter food infused into their gut, or a sweet versus sour, or a more sweet versus less sweet food, people have a selective preference for sweet foods, even if they can't taste them. Now, this is important to understand in the context of gut-brain signaling, because we always think that we like sweet foods because of the way they taste. And indeed, that's still true, but much of what we consider the great taste of a sweet food also has to do with a gut sensation that is below our conscious detection.
Right.
How do we know that? Well, the Bojorquez lab has performed experiments using modern methods, and there are classic experiments showing that animals and humans will actively seek out more of a particular sweet food, even if it bypasses this taste system. And the reverse is also true. There have been experiments done in animals and in humans that have allowed animals or humans to select and eat sweet foods, and indeed, that's what they do if they're given the option. And yet, to somehow eliminate the activation of these neurons within the gut that can sense sweet foods. Now, there are a couple different ways that those experiments have been done. In classic experiments that date back to the 80s, this was done by what's called
That's probably all I needed to play that. I kind of wanted to show you that how complex our gut is, and that there are actually cells in there that look for certain foods that have nutrients in it, and then they communicate to the brain that we have this nutrient inside our gut, and then makes our brain kind of in a happier state. When we have the wrong nutrients, our body can go into sort of a shock, and that's when we feel anxiety because our gut microbiome is not being fed properly, gets out of whack. Then the communication signals to the brain just don't work properly, and then before you know it, boom, you have generalized anxiety. Just got grossed out eating ice cream. No, huh, Jimmy? Is that a normal occurrence to have? Yeah, sweets can be hard as you get older. They're harder on the body. Obviously, as he was saying, sweet stuff is important, but like natural sugar, not like the sugar we put into all this processed food, or the fact like a can of soda has like a whole cup and a half of sugar in it. So if you actually measured and saw how much sugar was in it, you would never have a soda again in your life. That much sugar is not good for the body, and that's what's killing America's soda. And then the fact they should put a picture of how much sugar is in it on the soda can, and people would probably stop drinking it. For sure. We get some of the music playing in here, so it's not so quiet because I'm the only one here. But again, thanks for joining the Rumination Project tonight. Hit that like. Share me out, even though it's the end, because people do replay this a lot. There was a lot of very useful information on anxiety. I think in the hour and 15 minutes I've been on, it can help a lot of people understand maybe where their anxiety is coming from. That's the point of my podcast. If I don't care if even one person watches, if that one person can have a better life because of the information we present, then this podcast is worth it. Yeah, Jimmy, that's the worst thing about getting old is the food you used to like, you can't eat anymore. That's why, like this past week when I realized I had a really bad episode with gluten the other day where I smoked a little too much cannabis and I ate food that I shouldn't have, and I regretted it the next day. And you kind of have to sit down with yourself and kind of like have a burial for the food you used to like and be like, man, this sucks. This part of me's dying. I can't eat this kind of food anymore. If I want to be healthier and live a happier, anxious-free life. Like I can't eat dairy, but I've not eaten dairy for about 2 years now. I've adjusted pretty well. Like almond milk, I'm fine with now, and I don't really have issues with having milk in my life. I haven't drank it for years now, so the taste is kind of gone. I still do eat ice cream. I still can't have a certain amount of lactose. I just can't have over when I drink too much of it. That's when my body regrets it. So I'd say probably like half a cup to a quarter cup of milk at the most a day is what my intake is right now. And anything over that, I'm going to get an upset stomach. So I still can't eat some kind of cheeses and other things, but probably in 10 years, I'll probably have to be lactose free permanently, or maybe we'll find how to reverse that in our bodies. But there's a lot of good other products coming on the market that lack, don't have milk. And we're the only species on Earth that drinks milk into our adulthood, so I don't know how good it is for our gut, because milk is produced for younger mammals that are on our planet. They usually, till the child moves on, does the animal quit drinking milk. So it seems like the older you get, lactose intolerance definitely becomes a lot more prevalent, especially when you get into your 60s and 70s. And I know that lactose intolerance is on the rise as well. It's increased pretty substantially in the last 10 years. And it's because of all this stuff we keep introducing to our bodies. And I think we're really at a point now where we realize how bad these processed foods are, especially when you get into your 50s or 60s and then you have some kind of health condition that really scares you straight. It makes you realize how bad the decisions you were, in your life before about what you ate and put into your body that eventually led to, anxiety and depression and other issues in the brain. Yeah, goat milk probably is. I think probably goat milk is better because it's not as processed through, the evolution of how our dairy farms have evolved into what they are today. So goat milk is probably a lot more natural. I know the goat cheese is really good. There's a local Mexican place that has goat cheese, and that stuff's really good. And it never has any effect on my gut. So I think Jimmy has some truth there, because now you made me realize how much goat cheese sometimes I intake, and it has no effect. It doesn't tear my gut up like some of the cheese we offer, processed cheeses. But yeah, the gut definitely influences our mood. And I think we're waking up to that. Our science is coming to show that. Like you said, that neuropod cell, I can't even say it right. Neuropod cell has just been discovered in the last 10 years. So our gut microbiome, even though your doctor may tell you he understands it very well, science does not understand it. It is one of the most complex things in the universe besides our brain. And anybody can name anything more complex than your brain, second to your stomach. Please name it in the comments, because I don't know anything more complex than those two things. And our science is still definitely catching up to what they truly are and what actually is happening inside of our bodies. Because I don't trust pharmaceuticals, and I don't trust. I trust the knowledge of doctors, but they have a certain point with their knowledge where they don't understand the holistic part, and they don't understand maybe the gut microbiome as much as they should. I think literally that should be like a whole year of their study. Of a doctor's study is the gut microbiome. That's all you study for a whole year, because that is how important it is to your health. And it's very complex, and there's a lot of different things that you could go over as well. Like that guy's podcast was an hour and a half going over just the gut-brain axis, which is a very complex system in our body. Yeah, my doctor, Jimmy, had prescriptions my whole life since I was 12, and I had never in my life been mentioned that, hey, you should take some probiotics or take some prebiotics. And I think if any point in the last 15 years I would have been told that, then I would have had a lot less issues today. I wouldn't have as serious as a gluten allergy, because I think the lack of proper microbes while taking these antibiotics, depressants, just made it worse to where it's almost like a permanent issue, where food that's really hard to process, I just can't eat anymore. And gluten is really hard to process because the stomach, it's just, especially whole wheat for me, is very hard to process. So I try to stay anywhere from whole wheat. And it actually makes me very tired. So I have figured that out lately too. The bad foods, if you eat bad foods, you will feel tired afterwards. And now that I've kind of diverted towards a healthier, non-gluten life, I don't get tired anymore. I don't get after I eat like I used to, where I literally felt like I was going to fall asleep. And that was when I didn't understand what was going on in my body. And I've gotten testing done before. I went to a doctor. They did a complete test on my body's vital, or all the numbers, and everything came back completely normal. There wasn't anything wrong with me, but yet I was still in pain. So these issues are so hard to nail down, and really all it comes down to is like, just eat healthier foods. The Mediterranean diet really, especially, is these people who have Mediterranean diets live the happiest lives. That is a fact. That is a known fact that research is now basically verified, and I think in very numerous studies. And the fact that you eat it's basically a lot of fish, seafood, a lot of fruits, vegetables, red meat once a week, which is what I try to go towards. And your gut microbe will love it. You will pay off with less anxiety, a happier life. But that kind of diet is more expensive in our society, and that's the hardest thing for the Western society to go towards, because it's so expensive and people are on a budget. And if you want to eat healthy in America, it literally costs 2 to 3 times as much than going through, probably more than that, Jimmy, 2-3 times. You look at the price of the healthy choice, and then you look at the price of the processed food. and you understand why a lot of people make the decision. And it's just the way that we built the system up to the point where we're going to fail. We're going to mentally fail. And I don't know how to fix it other than we start going back to gardens. We start teaching children gardens. We start teaching gut microbes, bacteria into children in our education, and letting children know how important it is. And then showing the destructive effects of what processed foods do to your body over your life. I don't think we should stop hiding what these foods do to us. I mean, we all know what a cigarette does. Let's show what gluten does to the inside of your body, over time. Like these foods, not gluten especially, because gluten is not as bad as processed foods. So I'm not trying to bash gluten, sorry, but it is a harsher food. And if you stay away from gluten, you do tend to live a lot healthier life. So, but I'm not totally bashing gluten, because there are a lot of people who eat it just fine and have no issues with it. What did Putin just do, Jimmy, about the war? Or with Putin's done a lot of things, but what specifically did he do? Yeah, and I'm glad you found the Mediterranean diet too. Although I can't eat, I know a lot of nuts are in the Mediterranean diet, but at a certain point when you eat too many nuts, they're actually bad for you. And I think it's like half a cup a day. So I can see that when I eat too many nuts, because I like eating like seeds and stuff and different kind of nuts. But once I overdo it, I regret it. Putin outlawed all GMOs and processed foods. He made them illegal. So he did something good. What's he trying to do? Is he trying to enhance the gardening, or what was his reasoning behind it? I wonder. I didn't hear about that. Did that just happen today, Jimmy? Huh. That's interesting. I pay attention to the Ukrainian war and what goes on in the Kremlin, because I think it's fascinating, literally witnessing history play out. So even though it is really sad and dark and everything, I think it's important to pay attention to history, because it makes me realize how better my life is when I see what these people are going through. Not that we should use that as a way to, but it's a way to make you humble. It humbles you a lot when you see people going through a lot of stuff like that and realize how lucky you are. Stated so their people are more healthy. I mean, it doesn't matter if they eat better food. The Russian army is very poor trained, and they don't have very good morale. And that's why I really find this war fascinating, because of the fact that you have a highly morale. It's like the highly morale, but they have a high morale behind them. Then you have the Goliath Rush over here with a very poor morale, poor trained soldiers, but they have a lot more weapons and a lot more soldiers and a lot more other things, but they're losing the war. And that's the fascinating part. I find that how much morale plays into a part of a war, to actually where David could actually beat Goliath, it seems, in a way. So that's interesting that he wants his people to be more healthier for war when they're not very well trained anyway. We got 4 people in the house. Thanks for joining me today, guys. You can hit that like button, share me out. We've been live for about an hour and 25 minutes talking about anxiety tonight. And you can go over this video again. We went over how anxiety, what anxiety is. We went over how anxiety kind of influences the body and how to not have anxiety over having the anxiety. Having anxiety, is a completely normal thing in our lives. It keeps us safe. It keeps us out of trouble. But when it overwhelms us, that's when it becomes an issue. And I think a lot of this information I shared tonight can be very helpful in understanding what may be going on in your body, especially with your gut microbe. And the next few days, go eat something very healthy and stay away from gluten and sugars, and you'll notice a difference in your mood. I mean, you can prove this in your own life. It's a fact that our bodies are heavily influenced off in our gut. So I think the information that the lady said about our gut microbiome was really important. She that 8 minutes, she had a lot of very good information. I was highly impressed. That was the nutshell in the therapy, which you go check out on YouTube. Which, if you didn't notice earlier, YouTube pulled my feed because they said I copyrighted them, but it's pretty normal to get copyrighted when you're feeding in a copy of something that somebody already posted. Their computer catches it automatically. Even though they are educational videos, usually that they'll put it back up later when they realize that it was not exactly a copyright, because I've had it happen before. Because these educational videos, people make them to share out and educate people. They're not doing it to make money. So sometimes YouTube does copyright it. Yeah, fermented stuff for sure. A lot of people don't like fermented stuff because I can't think of the name. It's fermented cabbage. I can't think of what it's called. But I love fermented cabbage. If I can think of what the real name is. I have some in my fridge. But yeah, fermented stuff is loaded with probiotics, loaded with prebiotics, and it is, I believe, like one serving of it, sauerkraut. Yes, there it is. One serving of sauerkraut is equal to like a couple doses of prebiotics, and actually way more, a little more natural. But although, like the probiotic I take, this stuff is amazing. It's highly reviewed on Amazon. It has prebiotics and probiotics. I literally, when I ran out of it, 1 week I went through hell. All my manic came back, all my depression came back, and I realized, wow, this stuff's working. And I took it again, and I realized that it was really regulating my gut bacteria a lot better. That the product does actually work like it states. So if you're looking for a good one, this one's on Amazon. It's made by Physician's Choice, and it has 60 billion probiotics. It's about, you can get 60 capsules for about $33, but I think it's well worth it. You just take one a day, so 60 capsules can last you about 2 months. But that stuff works better than any prescription the doctor will give you. I will tell you that right now. And it actually is a lot more natural with no side effects because you're healthy gut microbes. But someday I'm gonna put down all the prescriptions I've taken in my life. I think it's about 15, and you'd be shocked about how many I've actually taken. I've taken Ritalin, I've taken Adderall, I've taken all the big ones, and they effed me up. I mean, they were fun to take. They worked for a while. I was like, wow, especially Adderall, I thought was an interesting drug. But overall, over time, I actually had to quit taking it because I lost too much weight. Adderall is basically a suppressant of hunger. You do not feel hungry, and you have all this energy, so you're going to have a lot of output without a lot of input. So I got down to a really unhealthy weight, and I had to quit taking Adderall. And that seems to be a lot of the reasons actually people quit taking Adderall. I got down to 157 pounds. That's not good for a guy my size. I'm a normal weigh 180. So when I got down to that, I had to, I'll send you the link, Jimmy. Yeah, there's a lot of probiotics sold on Amazon. I bought in a few brands. It's probably the most affordable place to buy them besides Walmart, but they only have like their own brands. You can't really like look through a review of something and buy it. So I like shopping through Amazon just for the fact I can read reviews of the products of other people who brought the same products and how good they had, the reaction they had. Yeah, most of them are junk. This one actually, the fact that I think it has is just loaded, and it's well described on the bottle. They really have, their label is the best label I've ever seen on any probiotics. They definitely go through everything that's in it, show you what's in it, and then they have a website too that shows you all where they source it. So this stuff's more like made in a lab. I think the Physician's Choice is like they have like a very serious lab. They have very serious research and products. Because a lot of them make products, but they don't ever research them. So what kind of if you're not researching and improving it based on the way your customers react to it, you're not being a very good company. Yeah, I trust my gut with this one. I remember when I woke up, I it was like 3 weeks ago. I ran out, and I was messaging my friend who has bipolar, and I was like, holy shit, my bipolar symptom, my manic is really, really high this week, and I don't know why. And that was at that moment when I realized that I had ran out of the probiotics like 5 days earlier. And I started putting 2 to 2 together, and I was like, it had to be that. Started incorporating it into my diet again, and I have a lot. Those manic episodes are a lot more controlled now. Like when they used to happen, I would it felt like bridges were burning in my head. So now they're a lot less severe, to we're a point where I can, kind of make sense of what is going on instead of being suffocated by the anxiety of the event, of the manic attack, I guess I should say. If people who have bipolar, who go through manic depression, kind of understand what I mean when those manic episodes hit all of a sudden. And sometimes they're very short-lived. I have manic episodes that last weeks, and I have some that last 30 seconds. And the gut background, the probiotics really help regulate that mood a lot better, so they're not as bad. So that's what bipolar is really swing between moods. And that obviously all the videos I showed tonight where we were talking about the gut brain axis and how important that is to your mood. And that right there is it's like I can feel sometimes the switch go off in my head. It's a chemical reaction, and all of a sudden my mood will change. And I've had that happen most of my life, and I've accepted that that's, I guess, the way my brain works. Although I do use psychedelics too, and I still am to kind of help fix that, and I think I am doing it very well. I feel like every day I'm becoming a better person, where I can say that someday that I had a very serious case of bipolar, but now I'm over it. But whether or not that label always stays, I've always wondered. I'm like, what happens if you actually cure bipolar? Like, if the symptoms all go away, do you still have it? Do you still label yourself as it, But those questions aren't important as to, actually keeping the illness or understanding it and keeping it at the calm level. It all starts in your gut microbe. So that's why I went over that a lot. I think you could have a whole nother episode on gut bacteria to really help tell people what it is. And I always forget, is Waylon on at 8:30 or 8? I forget to ask him because he uses to do them at a set time every night, so I don't forget. He has an 8:30 showing and an 8, and I get the nights confused. And I don't like to run into his show because he has an interesting show too. And we've gone an hour and 35 minutes. Just want to poop regularly. Yeah, constipation sucks. And if your body's has the right gut bacteria, you're not processing fiber, you're not processing nutrients right, leads to constipation, leads to a whole list of issues because your gut's just messed up. And it sucks. Yeah, I have issues. All my issues come in the morning, and it's all based on my anxiety. I've began to understand that in the last year of why I have a lot of my gut issues in the morning is because that's when your gut comes back online. So when you actually sleep, your gut actually goes offline, so you don't have to go poop in the middle of the night. So that's why you don't poop, because your gut microbiome and your vagus nerve kind of like calm down. When you wake up, it reactivates, and that's why when you wake up, some people you can have extreme anxiety when it reconnects to that brain axis, comes back online, the digestive system comes back online, and there's like this forward push of anxiety sometimes that I experience that can last 20 to 30 seconds in the morning. That doesn't happen when I take this. 100% has prevented this, as well as CBD, CBG. That stuff totally regulates gut microbiome. I don't care what science says. CBG 100% influences your gut bacteria. And over the last year of taking CBG, I don't think it's as strong as probiotics, of course, but I think it has an influence on it deeper in the system, like your small intestines, as well as your large intestines, where I have issues with my ulcers. So that's why I have a whole issue, these first, if I eat the wrong food, here's what happens. My gut gets inflamed. Anxiety happens. My gut gets inflamed. Then it messes with my ulcers. Then that ulcer gets inflamed. And then I have a herniated disc I herniated in 2019. And when that ulcer inflames, the large intestine presses on the other side of that nerve. And then I get back pain in that same area. And it can feel like, oh my God, I'm herniating my disc again. But that's not what's happening. It's hitting the backside of that weakened spine where you normally don't have something hitting, and it can feel uncomfortable. So that's all based off of food. If I eat it incorrectly, it goes all the way down to 6 hours later, I have back pain, and that's exactly why. And I've found to understand my body a lot more over the last year to really figure that part out. All I did was, when I felt pain, you just pay a lot more attention to, what caused it, what did I eat that day, what can I prevent to do it to a point where now I'm at where I have to totally eliminate pretty much gluten out of my body. Yeah, I had a lot of strange issues, Jimmy, when I first started using magic mushrooms. And my first experience with magic mushrooms, I woke up 5 hours into the experience and I had severe back pain. And being my first trip, I thought it was part of the experience. I'm like, okay, maybe your spine just does weird things. And it came to find out 6 months later, it's an ulcer. So what was happening was the mushroom was going later into my small intestines and rubbing on that ulcer, causing, a very discomfort pain, back pain that shot up my lower back. And during a trip, that can be a lot more uncomfortable, especially when you're 6 hours into the trip. But I've gotten that issue under control. I don't have that severe pain anymore. That was about 2 years ago. It took me a while to really understand what's going on because the doctor can't really tell me. I can't go to a doctor and be like, hey, I had a magic mushroom experience and I get the strange pain in my stomach or my gut 6 hours into it. And it has to do with the fact that it's a mushroom too. And mushrooms are very hard for the body to digest. But that experience helped me figure out later on, the multiple of experiences with magic mushrooms helped me figure out that I had an ulcer. And it helped me figure out that I needed to take the necessary precautions to heal the ulcer, to make it get better over years. Because ulcers don't heal over months. They take 6 months, a year, 2 years of changing your diet and consistently eating foods that don't aggravate it. Because I can go to my doctor and tell them I have an ulcer, but what are they going to do? They're going to give me a prescription that's probably going to make it worse over time. So I feel like, because a lot of these medicines mess with your gut and then there's a domino effect when you mess with your gut. And that's the issue with these prescriptions are, It's getting dark in here. But yeah, probably gonna sit here and end it. We're at an hour and 40 minutes, but we could probably stay here because there's more people coming in. It's just weird. But that's usually how it goes. More people come in towards the end of the show. But if you're just joining me, hit that like, share me out. We just had a really good hour and 40-minute episode about anxiety. We went into the details. A lot of it, 75% of it, I say, was about the gut-brain axis, because that's how important that is to our, being happy, to being anxiety-free. And we have to remember, anxiety is a normal thing to experience. It helps us, protects us. If we're out in the dark and we see a stranger approaching us in an odd way, that anxiety that we feel is the protection. Enhances our feelings, enhances our focus. So in case something does happen, our bodies can respond. So it's kind of like the first thing into fight or flight mode, that anxiety. So it's important to instinctively have to survive as a human being. But when that gets out of control, that's when we really, really start to suffer. And that's when anxiety starts to really be a thing. And I think that hopefully tonight, my episode really helped people understand that your gut microbiome is really a majority of where anxiety lies. I understand there are a lot of other things that causes anxiety, and we'll have further episodes down the road, like PTSD. PTSD anxiety. Now that's different. That's based more on like experiences, bad experiences, and then your brain trying to protect itself. And it's just not, we all experience PTSD in a way, especially if we have trauma or we have bad interactions with somebody that kind of we carry that weight for the rest of our lives. We don't forget that moment. It kind of influences our subconscious. Then I kind of think that could be referred to as PTSD. Anything that kind of influences your subconscious in a negative way. And so I don't think PTSD anxiety is something that relates only to people who go to war. I think it's something that a lot of humans are experiencing at an alarming rate, and then we talk about PTSD in soldiers and veterans, and we don't talk about it enough in normal humans. So I think people just they're like, well, I'm just something wrong with me, but they don't really understand that it's PTSD, that maybe you had a horrible divorce with your ex-husband you were married with for 45 years, and now you're scared to leave your house because you're scared to get your heart broken. That in a way is PTSD. You're scared, but you're so scared that you don't want to live life anymore because you're scared to experience that thing that broke you or made you feel really, really bad. And in a soldier's case, it's more violence-based, not as much trauma. It's the things that they see and experience that they go through. So there are different variations of PTSD, and I think we'll go over. I'm going to have a whole episode of an hour and a half on that in a couple of weeks. I'm trying to get a guest because I'd really, really like to get a therapist or somebody with a PhD on that episode, because PTSD is very complex, and I think something that as a society we need to understand better, that a lot more people experience than just veterans. But we got 6 people watching now. Thanks for joining me tonight. I know this is only my second episode, and we're going to try to build up a bigger audience. And I do have a lot of people that watch afterwards as well. So we are probably going to end it here. Thanks for joining me. Again, you can watch this. This will be on Facebook. It'll probably be on YouTube again, even though they took it down for copyright, but they always end up putting it back on. And Rumble as well. So you can always rewatch it. And I hope you guys join me next week. I think I have, I'm not sure if I put it in here. Nope, but I have, my next episode is going to be on fight or flight. I didn't have that portion ready. We're going to have a whole episode on what fight or flight actually is, what happens when you get stuck in that, which, kind of has to do with anxiety. That's why I wanted to talk about anxiety first before we started to talk about the more complex thing of fight or flight. And fight or flight mode is basically a very instinctual thing that we used to use for hunting. At least that's what science understands, is high stress situations we get to this fight or flight mode that we're either going to fight or we're going to run. And some people get stuck in that for weeks, months, years, and it heavily influences your body to a point where it can cause illness, cancer, various health conditions. The list goes on and on for things when you stay in that anxious mode. So we'll go over that next week, and there'll be a lot more education. I look forward to that. And we're going to play our exit music video, which is what I played at the beginning, which is our intro video of what we actually do here at the Rumination Podcast. Sorry, the Rumination Project podcast. So, got to get used to doing this faster. I got to pause the music. But until next time, I am Dan Baird with the Rumination Project. Please do not forget to hit that like button, share me out, and do not forget to love yourself today, because that is probably the most important thing I can say today. So until next time, peace, guys.